Hey, greetings. Michael DDA here, and I'm glad you're there. This is actually the second time that I'm going through this class. We covered it yesterday in our Sabbath class, but the weather was so bad that I'm going to have to redo this again. You know, I love Yehovah's word, and I'm going to do what it takes. Oh, this is so hard to do it by myself. I'm going to do what it takes to get that word to you. Let's begin. Last week, we left off here. We were talking about Abram's seed. Oh my goodness, this is so important that we understand about the seed of Abraham. Yehovah came to him in a vision at the beginning of this chapter. He was barren. I think it's so interesting. He's talking about Abram being barren. Bone of his bone, flesh of his flesh. That's Sarai. If she's barren, he's barren. He's concerned about the heir. And he's thinking that Eliezer's going to be the heir. Yehovah says, no, that's not going to be the case. The heir is going to come from your own body. Here, verse 4. There we go. Make it some big. Verse 4. I'm going to show it to you here on the right. And behold, the word of Yehovah came to him, saying, he shall not be thy heir, thy Yarash, but he who will come from your own body shall be thy heir. Thy, what was it? Yarash. This is interesting. He who will come from thy own body shall be thy heir. What is the difference between a woman, his woman? Okay, that's when we talk about wife in Torah. It doesn't say wife, it says his woman. But he's going to get a child in this very next chapter, the one we're going through today, from a concubine. He's taking Hagar, but the woman that we're talking about is Sarai. Well, this chapter is very, very important because Yehovah is going to give Abram a little bit of a timeline. Let's see if I can find it here. Here it is. He says, then he said to Abram, know for certain. That's interesting. No. That your seed will be strangers, Ger, in a land not their own. They will serve them, and they will afflict them 400 years. So here's a timeline that we talked about last week. It fits in really well with the 430 years. And when we understand that it was only 210 years that Israel, from the time Jacob arrived until the time we left to follow Yehovah and enter into his jurisdictional authority, it was only 210 years. So when he says that your seed is going to be afflicted for 400 years, strangers in a land not theirs, we must understand that we're talking about from the time that Isaac is born until the time that we come out of Egypt, That is 400 years. Exactly, to the very same day. We're going to see it as we go through. Well, we saw it last week, but we're going to see it again in the future. And now when we understand the 430-year prophecy, where it talks about us coming out of Egypt in Exodus 12, 430 years to the very same day, we understand that that was the prophecy that came to Abram when he was 70 years old. So 70 to 100 is 30 years. The 400 plus the additional 30 years gives us the 430-year prophecy and makes it all make sense. But one thing that really impressed me last week was this. It talked about a dream. First he has a vision. He's talking to Yehovah. They're having a conversation. Wow, this is the first time that's ever happened. But now he's having a dream. He had divided the animals that Yehovah told him to get: a cattle, a sheep, a ram, and 2 birds, a turtle dove, and a pigeon, a young pigeon. But during his dream, it says, it came to pass when the sun went down and it was dark, that behold, there appeared a smoking oven and a burning torch that passed between the pieces. The next verse says, on that same day, Yehovah made a covenant with Abram. When did the pillar of fire start in Egypt? I believe it started on this same day, the same day that we keep talking about, which is the first day of unleavened bread. The day that we came out of Egypt and became Yehovah's seed. Remember, the man who has left the kingdom of his birth and has joined himself to Yehovah and his people becomes a ger. And on the day we're talking about, the first day of unleavened bread, which begins with the Passover meal, the ger becomes an Ezra. And it wasn't until we became Yehovah's seed that we were allowed to leave Egypt. He told Pharaoh at the beginning, let my son go that he may serve me. Israel is my son, my firstborn. We're talking about a second birth, and this is it. Tying all these prophecies together is so very important, but seeing them over and over, Yehovah's talking about that very same day. Oh my goodness. Well, we are starting 16 today. We're going to talk about Hagar. Let's look at verse 1. Now Sarai, Abram's woman, had not borne to him, and she had an Egyptian handmaid, Shifka. Got to understand these words. These are important words. A Shifka is a maidservant as opposed to a female slave, which would be an amma, that is closer to the family. She had an Egyptian handmaid whose name was Hagar. Where did Hagar come from? Well, we have to do some backtracking. And remember, it was, well, here, it is right here. This is Yasher. Now therefore, here is thy woman. This is Pharaoh speaking when Abram was 75. Sarai would have been 65. This was after he tried to take her as a woman, as his woman, and Yehovah plagued him and his house. He's now given her back. Now therefore, here is thy woman. Take her and go from our land, lest we all die on account of her. And Pharaoh took more cattle, men servants, and maid servants, and silver and gold to give to Abram, and he returned unto him Sarai, his woman. And the king took a maiden whom he begat by his concubines, and he gave her to Sarai as a handmaid. What's happening here? Why is she doing this? Well, the next chapter, or the next verse, I'm going to stay here, but the next verse, verse 2 says this. So Sarai said to Abram, see now, Yehovah has restrained me. It's almost like she's blaming Yehovah for it. Well, we're going to see later on she's going to blame her husband for it as well. Has restrained me from bearing. Please go to my Shifka. Perhaps I shall obtain. We're talking about what? Sons. She wants to get sons. We'll talk about this word in just a moment. But it says, obtain sons by her. And Abram heeded the voice of Sarai. Sometimes that's not a very good idea. We'll talk about that in a moment. But here's what I wanted you to see. If a woman could not bear children, okay, it's not even about children. We want seed. We don't need a girl. We need a male child. If a woman could not bear children, another woman would often be brought in to do so. Children were a form of security, a ready workforce, fighters, and providers for their parents in their old age. Well, you know what? Workforce, fighters, providers for their parents, that's not what Abram needs. The only thing Abram needs right now is what? A seed. He's the head of a camp with more than 1,000 people in it. We saw last week he was able to pull 318 men born in his house to go fight 800,000 men. We're not worried about a fighting force. No, right now, Abraham needs an heir, and that's what this is all about. But Yehovah already said she was going to come from what? His own body. Well, let's go to the next verse. Verse 2. Here's my notes on it. So Sarai said to Abram, see now, Yehovah has restrained me from bearing. From bearing. Yeled. Please go to my Shifka. Perhaps I shall bear a son. Here's the word they use, Banah. Banah. I put son. It's about building. Let's look at the root of this word. Here it is right here. The picture bet is a picture of a tent. The noon is a picture of a sprouting seed and represents continuity as the seed continues to the next generation. The combined meaning of these letters means continuing the house. It is the male child that is going to continue the house. If you have a daughter, she's going to go to another man and help continue that house. We are talking about a son when we're talking about the Banah. You see that? Let's continue. Verse 3. Then Sarai, Abram's woman, took Hagar, her maid, her Shipka, the Egyptian, and gave her to her man for a woman to him. You know, when we talk about a wife in Torah, I know I kind of said this a minute ago, but when we talk about a wife in Torah, it's usually his woman. And I think it's really interesting that they're being very careful not to say his woman. Here is a concubine, Hagar, who is being given by her, we're going to see she's called a mistress, to Abram. And listen to how she says it. And gave her to her man, okay, this is Hagar, no, I'm sorry, Sarai, talking about her man. For a woman to him. For a woman to him. Not for his woman, for a woman to him. Very interesting how this is being put together. Remember, this is after Abram has dwelt in Canaan for 10 years. This is 7 years. Remember, he was 78 when he rescued Lot, and then the next chapter was talking about the seed, the one we just went through with you, chapter 15. 7 years have gone by. And 10 years since they've been married. No, much more than that. They were married when he was 50. He's now 85. 35 years have passed. She's now 75 years old, and she still doesn't have a child. She's concerned. I'm sure he's concerned. He was concerned 7 years ago. Perhaps I shall obtain children by her. What's going on here? And really this is a tradition of the land. A couple who was having trouble bearing children, specifically sons, would take another woman, and when that woman bore, she would sit on her knees. We'll see this more clearly in Yasher. She would sit on her knees, and the child would come through her legs as well. This is the son that is going to be born. And this is how Ishmael is being born. Let's go down to 4. So he went to Hagar, and she conceived. And when she saw that she had conceived, her mistress became despised in her eyes. She's getting a bad attitude. Hagar is getting a bad attitude. Verse 5. Then Sarai said to Abram, my wrong be upon you. I gave my maid into your embrace. And when she saw that she had conceived, I became despised in her eyes. Yehovah, judge between me and you. Think about this. My wrong be upon you. But this is true. Every woman's wrong is on her man. Bone of his bone, flesh of his flesh. The sin a woman brings into her life is not on her, it's on her man. Bone of his bone, flesh of his flesh. But this sin, and I use that word loosely, this sin was a lack of faith on Abram's part. You know, when we talk about your wrong be upon me, what's the wrong? Are we thinking of adultery? Is that the wrong that we're talking about? There are many who will tell you that Abram was committing adultery. And that's only because we define adultery according to the doctrines and traditions of men instead of what Torah talks about. Oh my, I had a big discussion on my Facebook page this week concerning one of my articles called Adultery 2. You should read it if you get the chance. No, the sin here on Abram's part, if there's sin at all, is the fact that he is taking this woman to try to expedite the promise that Yehovah had given to him, saying that it would come from his own body. Maybe he misunderstood. But she's frustrated. This made, we're going to see in Yasher, that Hagar is thinking that she is better than Sarai. Yehovah loves her more because she was able to bear a seed to Abram, or at least to get pregnant in such a short time. But Abram's got to deal with Sarai. She's upset. So Yehovah said to Sarai, indeed, your Shivka, no, thy Shivka is in thy hand. Do to her as thou please. And when Sarai dealt harshly with her, she fled from her presence. Where's she going? You know what? We have a lot of women in this world today that leave when things get tough. I read a book here recently. I like historical fiction, so a lot of times I'll listen to that when I walk. But it was talking about a woman who is a stander and a woman who is a runner. The stander is the woman you want. She's the one that's going to stick when things get tough. She's going to stick by her man. The runner, that's what Hagar's doing right now. Things are getting tough. She's leaving. She's left the camp. Remember, this is a pregnant woman. She hasn't had the child yet. She's alone in the world. Look at it, says the next verse. And now the messenger, Yehovah's messenger, found her by a spring of water in the wilderness, by the spring on the way to Shur. Just in case you don't know what spring we're talking about, it's the spring on the way to Shur. Well, a couple things I want to mention here. Here is, talks about Yehovah's messenger. You know, I like to turn people away from this word angel. Who's this messenger that we're talking about? It says he found her by a spring of water in the wilderness. If this is an angel, he doesn't have to find her. He knows where he's at or she's at. But he found her by a spring of water in the wilderness. Let's talk about this messenger, this melech. This is the word we're talking about, melech, messenger. A melech is a sent one. A messenger. A messenger's got a message that he's bringing from somebody. This says Yehovah. But we have to understand there's more going on here. Abram, like Moses, is, I think, a shalach of Yehovah, a sent one of Yehovah already. And if Abram is going to send a messenger to find Hagar, it's as if Yehovah sent the messenger as well. My point, I think this messenger is a man. Maybe that's not that important, but I think it is. Listen to what the messenger says. This is verse 8. And he said, Hagar, Sarai's maid, Shifka, Sarai's Shifka. He knows her name. He knows her position. But listen to what he says. Where hast thou come from? And where art thou going? We got a lot of women alone in the wilderness right now. He knows where she's supposed to be. She's Sarai's Shifka. But she's in the wilderness. Where hast thou come from, and where art thou going? And she said, I am fleeing from the presence of my mistress, Sarai. How many women could say, I'm fleeing from my master, such and such? Mistress. I think that's an interesting word. Here it is, up in the right-hand corner here. It's Geveret. Geveret. It's the feminine form of the word called Gabor. Gavor. Gaver. We call it Gabor. Remember, Nimrod was the defiled Gabor, the defiled mighty one on the earth. When we came out, 603,550 Gabor strong with our children out of Egypt, talking about the men. The Gabor, they are the mighty ones. They are the masters who are leading their families into the wilderness. If a woman is bone of a Gabor's bone and flesh of a Gabor's flesh, she's a Gaboret. The servant follows her master. You don't leave your master. We'll talk about that in a moment. I want to show you something in Yasher. This is a continuation of what we had already read. We were talking about, and the king took a maiden whom he begat by his concubines and gave her to Sarai for a handmaid, Shivka. But look at just a couple verses after that in Yasher. It says this, and the king said to his daughter, it is better for thee, my daughter, to be a handmaid, a Shivka, in this man's house than to be a mistress in my house, after we have beheld the evil that befell us on account of this woman. Hear that? It is better to be a handmaid in this man's house. This man's house. This Gabor's house. That's what Abram is. Than to be a mistress in my own house. You know, most ladies want to be the mistress. They don't want to be the servant. But she's far better off being the servant. It goes on. The angel of Yehovah said to her, return to thy mistress and submit thyself under her hand. You know what? In a sense, I'm a little bit like a man in the wilderness, telling ladies who have left their man, left their master, didn't like what he was doing. He was unkind, verbal abuse, physical abuse. They left their man, and now they're alone in the wilderness. Oh, don't be alone in the wilderness. There's no safety there. Yehovah gave the woman one instruction. It's all about conforming our life to Yehovah's created purpose. The woman was created as an etzer kenegdo, an aid suitable to her man. The man was created in the image of Yehovah. We each have duties and responsibilities in order to set our life in accord with Yehovah's created purpose. Follow your man. You know, we actually expect in this day and age for the woman to leave her father. Make a way in the world. Oh my gosh. You couldn't be further from the truth. Send her off to college. Let her get knocked up. Teach her ways that they should never go. I wouldn't want my son to be sent to college. No, we've learned lies. We're teaching women to be alone in the wilderness. Return to your mistress. Submit yourself under her hand. But she may have left, but she's still Sarai's Shivka. You know what? You may have left your man, but he's still your man. Yeah, you divorced him with the systems of the world. Does a woman leave her man ever in Torah? How about a servant? Does a servant leave her man? Can bone of your bone, flesh of your flesh leave you? No, doesn't work like that. Here's an unmarried woman alone in the wilderness. No, here is an unmarried pregnant woman alone in the wilderness, who Yehovah commands to return to her mistress. Yehovah does not want any woman alone and uncovered in the wilderness, in the world. Look at, here's Exodus 21, 2 and 3, talking about the Hebrew servants. If you buy a Hebrew servant, he shall serve 6 years, and in the 7th he shall go out free and pay nothing. If he comes in by himself, he shall go out by himself. if he comes in married, ba'ald, then his woman shall go out with him. But now look at this. It says, if the master has given him a woman, the master gave the servant a woman, and she has borne him sons or daughters. The woman and her children shall be her master's, and he shall go out by himself. But if the servant plainly says, I love my master, my woman, and my children, I will not go out free, then his master shall bring him to the judges, the Elohim of the city. He shall also bring him to the door or the doorposts, and his master shall pierce his ear with an awl, and he shall serve him forever. This servant who loves his master is going to now have all his seed serve the master as well. But what about the woman? She's going to stay. Look, and here's another one. This is Exodus 21, 2 through 8. And if a man sells his daughter to be a female slave, she shall not go out as the male slaves do. If she does not please her master, who has betrothed her to himself, then he shall let her be redeemed. He shall have no right to sell her to a foreign people, since he has dealt deceitfully with her. So what's going on here? The servants, female servants, they don't leave except with the master's permission. A woman does not divorce her man. A man divorces his woman. Why? Because she won't serve him, and she's bringing sin in his life. You know, boy, I would never have left my woman 10 years ago. I fought for 4 years to fight the court, to keep my family together. But you can't keep your family together if you have a woman who won't follow you, who doesn't want to follow you. Had I known what I know now, I would have saved myself a lot of grief and let her go. The problem is, in this world, they take your children as well. And it broke my heart. But now that I know, 10 years later, I've learned some Torah. I know that you can't keep a woman in your life who won't follow you. I wanted to train up my children in the way they would go. My woman wanted to roll her eyeballs at the table when I started talking about Torah. No, you can't do that. So a man can let a woman go, but it doesn't work the other way around. You say, that's unfair. That's what a lot of people say. They want to say, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. But is that what Yehovah says? Do we care what Yehovah says? I care what Yehovah says. No, there's different duties and responsibilities for a man in Yehovah's kingdom than there is for a woman in Yehovah's kingdom. A woman does not leave her man. That's why he says, return to your mistress. Well, let's move on. Next verse. Then the messenger, Yehovah's messenger, said to her, I will multiply your descendants exceedingly. Your seed is what we're talking about. I will multiply your seed exceedingly, so that they shall not be counted for multitude. That's confusing to me. We'll talk about what it really says. I put the seed. I will multiply thy seed. Does a woman have seed? She's got seed in her belly right now. Well, actually, we don't know if it's seed or not. But she's got a child in her belly right now. Does a woman have seed? No. If the seed belongs to anyone, it belongs to Abram. It's his seed. She is a woman of Abram. Remember, we talked about weeks ago, maybe we need another word for woman. His Isha is what gets translated as wife. But even woman has so much baggage that goes along with it. I suggested that maybe we consider appendage. If we understand that she is bone of his bone, flesh of his flesh, would we understand better the role of a man and the role of a woman in Yehovah's kingdom? I put, she's a woman of Abram, his appendage. So only in that respect is the seed hers. In that respect, it would be. In this verse, it says, so that they shall not be counted for multitude. I think that's confusing. Thy seed will be greatly increased so that it may not be numbered, is kind of what we're talking about. Of course, this would not have happened had Abram not tried to get an heir through his own efforts in the flesh. You know, trying to get this seed in the flesh, instead of waiting for Yehovah to fulfill his word in the spirit, is exactly what the Jews have done in taking Israel for themselves. And Jerusalem. They have done in the flesh what Yehovah is going to do in the spirit in the last days. They didn't want to wait. And it has created a problem for them. They don't know it yet. I've got some things that I'm going to teach you about Jerusalem, about how it relates to Sodom. Remember talking about Jerusalem, I talked about your sister Sodom and her daughters. Sodom was destroyed at Passover. And the spiritual child we're going to see is going to be born at the very next Passover, on the very same day. Oh, I love that. On the very same day. Always directing us to the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, Passover. There's something going on that Yehovah wants to show us, but we keep missing it. Well, let's get back to our story. Verse 11. And Yehovah's messenger said to her, behold, you are with child. You're pregnant. And you shall bear a son. You shall call his name Ishmael, because Yehovah has heard your affliction. Heard your affliction. What's her affliction? Sarai's being mean. Sarai's beating me. My husband's beating me. Return to your mistress. But no, that's El hears. That's what Ishmael means. El hears. Because Yehovah has heard your affliction. Does it go unnoticed? You know, some of the things that we see in Torah, think about the conditions on concerning beating your servants. Okay, I'm not encouraging wife beaters. Okay, I'm not. Don't even go there. That would be ridiculous to even suggest such a thing. But I want you to see some things that I really think we miss. In Torah, if we beat our male or our female servant and she dies or he dies, we get punished. Not killed, just punished. But if she lives or he lives 2 or 3 days, there's no punishment. Wow. If you strike your male or female servant and put out an eye or break a tooth, you have to let him go because of the tooth, because of the eye. But does it ever say anything about bone of his bone and flesh of his flesh? Now again, I'm not saying beat your woman, but I'm recalling to you what it actually does say. Or maybe what it doesn't say. I think that's significant stuff. But know that Yehovah, Elohim, hears. El hears. Well, the next verse we talk about is talking about Ishmael. It says in my New King James, he shall be a wild man. His hand shall be against every man, and every man's hand against him. And he shall dwell in the presence of all his brethren. He shall dwell in the presence of all his brethren. Well, I had to search this one out. Again, have to go back to the Torah and find out what the Torah actually says. The word that they're calling wild man is this word right here. Para. Para. It's where we get the word pariah. A para is an onager. An onager is a wild ass. But I don't think that's what we're talking about. I think we're talking about an outcast. He will be an outcast. Not only that, he is an outcast Adam. Adam. Flesh man. With his hand against everyone. It says every man. No, it says his hand against everyone. They mean every man. I know they do. But there's no man there. I looked. Does it say Ish? Does it say Adam? No, it doesn't say either. It just says every, all, call. With his hand against everyone and everyone's hand against him, dwelling at odds with all his brethren. Dwelling at odds with his brethren. Think about this. When Isaac was being weaned, he was 3 or 4 years old. I know that's a long time for a weaning, isn't it? It was at that time that maybe Ishmael got jealous. They're having a big party for Isaac. I mean, people came down, relatives came down from Haran to visit. Huge party. And he is looking to do Isaac harm. And because of that, he's put out of the camp with his mother. Because he's at odds with Isaac. He's outcast. because he's dwelling at odds with his brethren. He did come back home later, many years later, and he dwelt with Isaac for a long time. We're going to see that in Yasher. Well, there's more to the story. Verse 13. Then she called the name of Yehovah who spoke to her, called Yehovah's name this: You are the Elohim who sees. She called the name of Yehovah who spoke to her. Remember, we're talking about the messenger who spoke to her. This happens a lot. The messenger gets confused with the one who sent him. I think this is what's happening with Yeshua. Everybody wants to make him Elohim. At best, if Yeshua existed at all, he was a prophet, a sent one of Yehovah to turn men back to him, not to die for anybody's sins. That's just a made-up story. We've learned lies. Yehovah does not change, and his word endures forever. We're going to see how a man becomes born a second time within just a couple more weeks. It's coming soon. In fact, it might even be next week now that I think about it. Depends on how far we get, I guess. But sometimes the messenger gets confused with the one who sent him. And I think this is what's happening with Yeshua. They make him Elohim, and he ends up being our golden calf. We worship the golden calf instead of Yehovah. Have I also seen him who sees me? Well, again, has she seen Elohim? The answer is no. Can't see Elohim. He's spirit. He's spirit Elohim. What can you see? You can see a man who he sends with his message. But I think she's sensing that Yehovah cares enough for Abram's woman and son to send her back. What happened, or maybe I should say, what would happen if she didn't go back? Say she made it down to Egypt. Would she make it down to Egypt? Where's her rightful spot in this world? She was given to Abram. It is better to be a shifka in this man's house than to be a mistress in mine. She was given to Abram. You know, here's another thing we got to think, and we got to ask ourselves. Did she have a choice? Does a woman always have a choice on where she's going to go? When she was given to Abram, I think her father was consoling her when he said, it is better to be a shifka in this man's house than to be a mistress in mine. A Geveret in mine. When she was given to Abram, did she have any say in it? Doesn't appear to me that she did. She's a servant. But even a free woman, we saw Rebecca had a choice. Will you go with this man? Yes, I'll go with him. But does every woman have a choice? Certainly not in Torah. Not in Yehovah's kingdom. Oftentimes it's the father who's giving her to the man. Oh, well, things are different now, don't you know? Oh, Does Yehovah change? Does his word not endure forever? No, there's more that we have to understand, isn't there? I'm sorry, verse 14. Therefore, the well was called, here it is, Be'er Lakai Ra'oi, the well of him that liveth and seeth me. He sees you. Are you going to obey? Or are you going to continue your way in the ways of Egypt? That's where she was going. She was going back to daddy, I think. But that wasn't where she was supposed to be. Yehovah told her where she's supposed to be. Return to your mistress. Therefore the well was called Ber Lahai Roy. I want to show you. Let me start this up for a second. All right, here we go. Here's Hebron. You probably see well, I know you're going to see a hand this time because it's not live in my room. You see a hand right there on Hebron. That's where Abram's at. That's where he's been for the last 10 years. No, even longer than that. Since he was 75. He's 85. No, I guess 10 years. 10 years. That's where he's been for 10 years. She came all the way down to Be'er Lakai Ra'oi, between Kadesh Barnea and another place, Barad, I believe is what it was called. But in Yasher, it's called the wilderness of Barah. Barah, I think. Maybe that's what it is. But she was on her way to Egypt. Here's Egypt. Let me just make this a little bit bigger. Here's Ber Lakai Ra'oi. Here's Egypt, just over here. She was on her way home to daddy. That's not where she belonged. She belonged where? Back here in Hebron, in Abram's house, following her mistress, her Geberet. 2 more verses. So Hagar bore Abram a son. What did it say? You shall call his name. Here, look at what it says. There's things going on here. You shall call his name Ishmael, because Yehovah has heard thy affliction. But now look what happens. So Hagar bore Abram a son, and Abram named his son. The man names his son whom Hagar bore. Named him Ishmael. Abram was 86 years old when Hagar bore Ishmael to Abram. Not to herself, to Abram. She's his woman, bearing for him. Oh, I know, I sound like a chauvinist. I know you hate it. But you know what? Get over it. If you see that I'm not saying what Yehovah says, call me on it. Show me different. But you're not going to be able to, because I can show this to you over and over and over again. Well, I want to turn now to Yasher. I just want to finish up a little bit of Yasher, and we'll call this good. I know I went through a much longer presentation on Sabbath, but I'm doing my best here. We left off here. This was right after Abram fought the 800,000 men that came from the north, the giant killers, and brought Lot and his people back to Sodom. Then Abram returned home, and now at the same time, he's still 78. This is where we left off. This is the last chapter, I think, 14 that we covered when we were talking about the seed. No, I guess that would be 15, last week's chapter. It says, do not fear, thy reward is very great before me, for I will not leave thee until I have multiplied thee and blessed thee and made thy seed like the stars of heaven. Remember, we're talking about spiritually born men. It's not about Ishmael. If it were about Ishmael, then the prophecy would have been wrong for the 400 years. It was about Isaac. And then we came out, the spiritual men, at exactly 400 years from the very day. It's not about the flesh. It's about the spirit when we're talking about Abram's seed. And made thy seed like the stars of heaven, which cannot be measured nor numbered. And I will give unto thy seed all these lands which thou seest with thy eyes, and to them I will give them for an inheritance forever. The seed are going to get the land. This is what it's always about. Only be strong and do not fear. Walk before me and be perfect. Well, here we left off with the 78th year. So we want to begin here. The 78th year of the life of Abram is when Rahul died. Now he's 85. And this is the story that we just went through concerning Sarai giving Hagar to Abram. Here's their version. And Sarai, the daughter of Haran, Abram's woman, was barren in those days. She did not bear to Abram either son or daughter. What did he want? He needs a son. And when she saw that she bare no children, I think the word that we're looking for was that Banah, she took her handmaid Hagar, her Shivka Hagar, whom Pharaoh had given her, and gave her to Abram, her husband, for a woman. Not his woman, a woman. Again, they're saying it differently than you would see it in Torah if we were talking about a wife. They translate it as a wife. But I don't think they understand the deeper things of Torah. Now it has a digression or a clarification, because it says he gave her to Abram, her husband. Okay, that's her husband, her man, for a woman. And Hagar learned all the ways of Sarai, as Sarai taught her. She was not in any way deficient in following her good ways. Oh, I think that is so interesting that Sarai in these last 10 years had taken this woman who had come into her house and taught her those good ways. She had learned those good ways in these past 10 years. And Sarai said to Abram, behold, here is my handmaid Hagar. Go to her, that she may bring forth on my knees, there it is, that I may obtain Banah through her. I'm using that Banah word because it was in there in Torah. Don't know the Hebrew for Yasher. But again, take her. Does Hagar have any say in the matter? Doesn't appear to me that she does. And at the end of 10 years of Abram's dwelling in the land of Canaan, which was the 85th year of Abram's life, Sarai gave Hagar unto him. Abram hearkened to the voice of his wife, of his woman, Sarai. You know, why do I keep changing it from wife to woman? Again, it has to do with developing deeper understandings. If we are going to limit it when it says his woman to making it his wife in Torah, we're going to limit our understandings. And really, we're going to pervert our understandings later on, because there's going to be some times where it means woman and it says wife, and if we don't understand woman, it's going to throw us off. So I'm trying to develop good habits in our understandings. I want you to be able to read Torah for yourself and go deeper because you've learned the finer points. Let me begin again. And Abram hearkened to the voice of his woman Sarai, and he took his handmaid Hagar, and Abram came to her, and she conceived. And when Hagar saw that she conceived, she rejoiced greatly, and her mistress, her Geveret, was despised in her eyes. And she said within herself, this can only be because I am better before Elohim than Sarai, my mistress. For all the days that my mistress has been with my Lord, she did not conceive. But me, Yehovah has caused in a short time to conceive by him. Talking about, she learned her good ways, but she's still got some bad attitudes. We all have some bad attitudes. I have some bad attitudes. When I saw my recording didn't work, I had a bad attitude. But we're getting through it, aren't we? And when Sarai, I got to obey my master, whether I like it or not. And when Sarai saw that Hagar had conceived by Abram, Sarai was jealous of her handmaid. Even Sarai is jealous. And Sarai said within herself, this is surely nothing else but that she must be better than I. Oh. I just hate to see that. It breaks my heart. We limit ourselves and pick on ourselves so much. She must be better than I. No! Yehovah's got something else going on. And Sarai said to Abram, my wrong be upon thee. Well, here it is. What's the wrong? For at that time when thou didst pray before Yehovah for Banah, really, he was praying for seed, wasn't he? Well, he was praying for a man, a son. Why didst thou not pray on my account? And that Yehovah should give me seed from thee. Well, little did she know, Yehovah promised that seed from her. It's still coming. And when I speak to Hagar in thy presence, she despises my words, because she has conceived, and thou wilt not say nothing, and thou wilt say nothing to her. May Yehovah judge between me and thee, for what thou hast done to me. Wow, this was her idea. And Abram said to Sarai, behold, thy handmaid is in thy hand. Do unto her as it may seem good in thy eyes. What does it say? And Sarai afflicted her, and Hagar fled from her to the wilderness. The servant was being afflicted by the master. And the angel, Yehovah's messenger, found her in the place where she had fled by the well. And he said to her, do not fear, for I will multiply thy seed. Remember, she doesn't have seed. For thou shalt bear a son, and thou shalt call his name Ishmael. Now then return to Sarai, thy mistress. What was it? Geberet. And submit thyself under her hand. And Hagar called the place of that well Be'er Lakai Ra'oi. It is between Kadesh and the wilderness of Bered. There it is, Bered. And Hagar at that time returned to her master's house. Return to your mistress. Where does it say she returned to her master's house? Oh, ladies, if you're alone in the wilderness, return to your master's house. It's there that you're going to learn to serve Yehovah and live according to his created purpose. If you don't go back, you're lost. You're lost in the wilderness. Yeah, you may take another husband, but that's not what Yehovah plans. And at the end of days, Hagar bare a son to Abram, and Abram called his name Ishmael. And Abram was 86 years old when he begat him. Well, hey, thank you for listening. Remember, all of these videos are on YouTube. Please consider starting from the beginning. Yehovah's word builds line upon line, precept upon precept, here a little, there a little. If we get it from the beginning, we're going to get a better chance to understand the whole of it. But if we're not going to learn it piece by piece, we're going to be thrown off because we end up learning it according to the doctrines and traditions of men that we've all learned, instead of understanding it in light of Yehovah's whole word. Hey, thanks for joining me. I hope you can join me again next week. Love you tons. Bye now.